Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome to this week's Inspiration and Transformation.
Beautiful question. I want to surrender to God's will, but how do I know what's God's will? And when I get obstacles, is it God's will that I have obstacles? Is this a sign that I'm not going with God's will? I am going with God's will. Obstacles are always there. Whether you look at the lives of our divine manifestations in any religion, whether it's Krishna, Ram, Jesus Christ, wherever you look, those who were divine incarnations, divine manifestations, our prophets, saints, leaders, however we refer to them or conceive of them, they all had obstacles. You look at the flow of Ganga. How many rocks, how many turns, how many curves, how many rapids. So having obstacles doesn't mean it's not God's will. But in every one of these cases, despite the obstacles, they keep moving. They keep going. And so, living with God's will, surrendering to God's will, means Pujya Swamiji speaks very beautifully about the life of Krishna, for example, and how he had literally obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And of course, when we look at the lives of the divine manifestations, the whole point of it is lessons for our lives. It's not like Krishna actually had obstacles or Ram actually had obstacles. The point is that what we learn from these messages, how we can take that. So he speaks very beautifully about how he had obstacles after obstacles from the moment he was born. And yet, he's always seen with the flute, singing, that song was always on, regardless of what happened. And the message is, when we are living with God's will, obstacles are bound to happen. Waves come in the ocean. There's high tide, there's low tide, there's in nature. Rainy seasons, dry seasons, hurricanes. There's nothing that God has created that doesn't have ups and downs. But what's important when we are surrendering to the will is that we keep flowing, we keep moving, and that we don't lose metaphorically the song in our lives. And then lastly, well, how do we know what's God's will? This, of course, is not something I can sit here and say to you, well, here's the equation. What I can say is that every one of us, every creature on earth, is built in with a... Pujya Swamiji refers to it as our GPS, our internal navigation system. We're built in with a sense of knowing. Whether you call it an inner voice, whether you call it intuition, whether you call it divine voice, however we conceive of it. Every one of us has that. And the reason that you know that is that everything in nature has it. Look at a caterpillar. It's my favorite example. It spends the first part of its life crawling on the ground. Then one day, it hears a voice, or it gets a sign. I don't know exactly how it happens, but something happens in that caterpillar, and it says, climb a tree. And then it says, now go out on a branch. Now this caterpillar has never seen anyone climb a tree and return. Right? And unless they're much, much more divinely wise than I think they aren't able to understand that the butterflies overhead were mom and dad. So all they've watched is fellow caterpillars go up trees and never return. It's sort of the, Bermuda Triangle of the caterpillar life. Whatever goes never comes back. And yet, when he hears that voice, he goes. And then the voice says, now go on a branch. And then the voice says, now weave yourself into this suffocating thing. And then it says, now sit still and don't move, and I'm going to take you apart. And then it says, now burst free and jump. And I share this with you because if God has given, or the Creator, by any name, any form, however we envision it, has given that knowing to a caterpillar, to seeds, to plants, to animals. Fujitomi always says, you never see an animal eating a different animal's food. Dogs eat dog food, cats eat cat food, birds eat bird food. Lions eat lion food. You never see them messing it up. They all know what to do. They know what their language is. They know where to have their babies, how to rear their babies. They know how to do everything. So if that wisdom has been given to every single creature on earth, it is inconceivable that it hasn't been given to us. The problem is that we are, I believe, the only creature that has managed to figure out how to not hear the voice. And so we're sort of the equivalent of the caterpillar that is so busy bemoaning the fact that he's not the millipede, and that the millipede has 1,000 legs and I've only got 12 legs or 16 legs, and it's not fair, and I never get what I want. Everybody always gets something better than I get. That we don't actually hear the voice. We miss the call. So in order to hear that divine will, because everyone's is different, and at every moment in our life it's different. It's not like you're here with one set plan. God has a will for you in every moment. In every turn. And so, in order to move with that, we have to be quiet enough that we can actually hear the voice. It's there, but there's just so much other junk going on. I want to just conclude with a very quick demonstration that I love that will help you understand this. We'll do it really quickly. I'm just going to divide everybody like right here in the center. So you with the beautiful blonde hair, can you just raise your hand? Okay. Everybody on this side of her is one side. Everybody on the other side is a different side. Now, everybody on this side is going to chant Om. Okay? everybody on this side is going to make as much noise as you possibly can. Now, I know we're in Satsang, I know we're in a really holy place, but let yourself go. Really. As much noise as you possibly can make. Just create a total ruckus, okay? So on the count of 3, we're going to do both, and then when I raise my hand, you'll all become quiet, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, now everybody quiet. Now, we're going to do it again. The only difference is that in the middle, I'm going to either give this hand up or this hand up. And if I give this hand, it means you become quiet over here. If I give this hand up, it means you become quiet over here. But the other group should keep going, okay? So this hand means this group is quiet, this group is going. This hand is this group becomes quiet, but this group keeps going. Okay, so everybody together, 1, 2, 3. You people were oming the whole time? Or you just started when I put my hand up?
The whole time.
The whole time. I couldn't hear you. I love this little demonstration because this is what happens in our mind. The Om is always there. But we don't hear it because this is going on. And then we say, I need to get in touch with my inner voice. I need to hear God's voice. I need to find Om. Well, you don't need to find Om, or God's voice, or the divine voice, or your inner voice. It's all there. All you need to do is quiet this nonsense. And you can hear it. Okay? So, that obviously is easier said than done, but that's what the whole practice of meditation and sadhana is all about. That's why we meditate. It starts to quiet this. That's why we have a path of sadhana, a path of yoga. It starts to quiet this. And then you'll be able to hear that divine voice very, very clearly. Because if a caterpillar can, then certainly we can.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
लेकिन जब तक हम इसको पहचानते नहीं हैं, तो फायदा क्या है? She said, we've been told that the Guru's inside of us. So what about that? And I said, well, everything is inside of us. But until we recognize it, until we realize it, then we're not benefited by it. So, absolutely the Guru is inside. God is inside. Sab kuch andar hai. But in order to see it, we have to open our inner eye. If we're only using these two eyes, then we can only see what's outside of us. If we open our inner eye, our third eye, then we can actually see everything and hear everything. But until that happens, we need the inner guru reflected in the outer guru, or the outer guru reflected in the inner, either way, because they're both the same. It's very, very difficult to access the divine within ourselves. This is why people ask the same thing, mandir mein kyun jaye? Bhagwan to andar hai. Murti ka kya karan hai? Why do we have murtis? Why do we go to temples? If God is inside us, why go anywhere? Because are we living like God is inside of us? It would probably be difficult for most of us to raise our hand and say, yes, I'm living like God is inside me. Yes, I'm living like the Guru is inside me. So until we're really living fully with God inside us, going to temple reminds us. Praying before a murti reminds us. Whether the murti is an image of Krishna or Ram or Shiva, or it's a tree, or it's a sunset, or it's your grandmother. And until and unless we're able to hear the Guru within inside ourselves, and have that darshan, and be whacked around internally, without our mind coming in and saying, oh no, actually I'm really very good. मुझे तो सब कुछ मालूम है, गुरु तो अंदर है, भगवान अंदर है, कहीं जाने का कोई जरूरी नहीं है. That's what tends to happen to most of us.
He's the inner one. He's not only inner, inside of us. He is the inner one. Because of him, because of that inner one, you see all of that. When that experience happens, Guru happens. But the best part is not to wait for the Guru to happen. How you can happen to the Guru. If you happen, Guru is there to happen. Because grace is always there. I remember in my childhood, when I came back from the jungle, Swamiji here used to give one beautiful sermon every day in the morning, 5 o'clock. Everyone has to go there, and after the prayers, meditation, we had half an hour sermon. And these questions about Guru, because people are looking for the real touch. Not only teaching, people are looking for touch. But how the touch can be found? And the Guru is touch. Guru is not teaching. Guru is touch. So, he used to give example. He used to say, just imagine you have a bucket, empty bucket, and the tap is on, and water is on, water is coming down from the tap, but unfortunately the bucket is upside down. Even the tap is on, but I am upside down. So what will happen? All the water, even is there, is for you, for your bucket, for your heart to be touched. But I am not there. It's not the Guru, it's I have to be there. If I am there, is happening, is waiting to happen. लेकिन बस कुछ कुछ हमें होने लगे, वहाँ बहुत कुछ होने की तैयारी है. सच्ची. बस प्रार्थना ये करो, मेरा प्रयास नहीं कि मुझे कुछ कुछ होने लगे प्रभु. बस उस कुछ कुछ की तैयारी ही साधना है. बस बहुत सुंदर, भाग्यशाली है.
As Pujya Swamiji was saying, most of the time what people do is dream. Well, there's actually what's called a circadian rhythm, which has to do not just with your personal rhythm, but actually with what time of day it is. And regardless of what time you went to sleep, a greater percentage of the sleep cycle is spent in dream sleep toward the morning. The closer it gets to the morning, the greater percentage of dreams. So if you go to sleep at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, even if you sleep 8 hours, you're not actually going to wake up refreshed because you've spent such a huge percentage of that sleep time dreaming. Whereas if you go to sleep at 8, a fabulous ideal, not quite so possible, but nonetheless, we aim for something that early, and then if it becomes 10, 10:30, it's still okay. You spend a huge percentage of time actually in what's called restorative sleep rather than in REM sleep or dream sleep. And so you actually wake up much, much fresher even with fewer hours. So the concept of fewer hours is not something that you can just take and apply it across the board and say, oh, well then, instead of going to sleep at 2 and waking up at 10, I'm going to go to sleep at 2 and wake up at 6. It's not going to work. If you want to get by on 5 hours of sleep or less, or 6 or less, or whatever your goal is, rather than chopping off the hours at the beginning, chop them off at the end. Go to sleep as early as you can and chop them off at the end. This is something, of course, that the spiritual masters have been telling us for thousands of years, but modern science and sleep science is actually now catching up and telling us the exact same thing.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
The actual word, let's start there. The actual Sanskrit word of guru is made up of 2 different parts, gu and ru. Gu is darkness, ru is the remover of that darkness. So a guru is one who removes our darkness. But then, of course, the question becomes, what type of darkness? What is that darkness? If in Indian spiritual tradition, as we were speaking about earlier, of who we are and the core of who we are and the essence is pure and perfect and divine and whole and complete, and we've been created of the Creator, not just by the Creator. Well then, what darkness? That darkness is the darkness of ignorance. There's no sense in this culture of darkness at the core of who you are. Even the demons are demons because of their false identification, their ego, their greed, their lust, their arrogance. It's not a sense of darkness at the core of the self, darkness in the very essence of the being, but rather that essence, that core, has been covered, as with so many of us, all of us mostly, with ignorance and that false identification with the body, with our history, with what we look like, where we've been, what we've achieved, what our bank balance looks like, how we measure up in the society, what sort of certificates we have on our walls. And so we start identifying as that. From that identification comes darkness. Greed, anger, depression, all of that which we would consider quote-unquote sinful springs out of that darkness of ignorance. If, for example, I realize that you and I are one, that there's divinity at the core of who I am and divinity at the core of who you are, then there's no question of me cheating you or lying to you or abusing you or injuring you in some way. Because A, we're one, and B, who you are is divine. So anything that enables me to betray you or lie to you or cheat to you or abuse you is ignorance. Anything that allows us to abuse ourselves, to abuse our planet, to abuse anything, to act out of lust or greed or anger is due to this identification. What causes anger? Well, unfulfilled expectations typically. And if I've expected something and I've identified with what I've expected, I'm living in ignorance. I'm not aware then that I'm already full. I'm already complete. I'm already whole. I'm already divine. I don't need what that person's going to do or say or how they're going to talk to me or how they're going to receive this project or whether I'm going to get a promotion. And if there aren't those expectations, then there isn't the anger at the lack of fulfillment of the expectations. And if there's no anger, then I tend not to be acting out of it. So you see how we spiral. So that's a very basic glimpse of what we would call darkness. The Guru comes in and shines the light. It's beautifully, beautifully said that there's no point in fighting darkness. We just need to light a candle. And that's what the Guru does. The Guru comes in as the light and shines the light. And, you know, in the West, we frequently misdefine Guru as a teacher. And yet, as I always explain, you know, the core difference is that a teacher can give you information, even skills, knowledge, but not experience. And so if you take a class, for example, with the most brilliant teacher of oceanography, you will learn everything there is to know about the ocean. What lives in it, what it's made of, how wide it is, how deep it is, all of the fantastic, beautiful information about the ocean. But when you stand up and walk out of that class, your clothes will still be dry. With the Guru, if a Guru were giving you oceanography, not only would you learn about the ocean, but your clothes would be dripping wet. You actually would have the experience of being in the ocean. So the Guru not only tells us about light, and about truth, and about peace, and about bliss, and about God, but actually in the Guru's presence, we have the experience, the spiritual equivalent of having soaking wet clothes. That we're in the presence of love and light and God and truth and bliss and peace. And then the question becomes, well, do we need one? In theory, no. Because in theory, all of those things are our birthright. Love and light and joy and bliss and peace and truth are our birthright. It's the nature of who we are. And yet, if you're like most of us, you're not able to actually experience most of that in our lives. We tend to stay caught in the darkness, caught in the ignorance, caught in the false identification. And so what the Guru does is bring us onto that path and give us that experience. And then show it to us within ourselves. So the whole nature of who we are, how we understand ourselves, how we understand the world, everything changes. Everything shifts from dark to light. But the last point that I want to mention about that is because our egos as disciples, the egos come into play. And what ends up happening, another beautiful analogy that's given about the Guru, is as a potter sitting at a wheel with clay that he's turning into a bowl or something beautiful. And what we've got is a lump of clay. Full potential, full everything, but nonetheless a lump of clay. But on the potter's wheel, what does the potter do? Spins that wheel, hitting that lump of clay every time it goes around from every side, and turns it into something that's exquisite. And not only exquisite, but in most cases actually useful. Cups, bowls, vases, and exquisite ones. But in order to turn that lump of clay into that, the potter has to keep hitting it, whacking it in many cases. And so, although the Guru is doing his part. As disciples, we also have to let ourselves be whacked around. Otherwise, we just stay a lump of clay. And sure, it may be more comfortable than to be spun around until you don't know which end is up and whacked at every turn. But if in our lives we actually have a goal, a vision of being useful, beneficial, exquisite as a bonus, we have to let ourselves be spun around and whacked by the critter. So it takes from the disciple also an openness to the presence of the light, to the capital T truth of the light, to a relinquishing of our darkness, because otherwise the darkness is very alluring. We like to hang on to it. We know it very well. So an openness to that. And then allowing ourselves to be literally whacked into shape.
This is OTR FM, part of the IOM radio network.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
When I broke my foot, for leaving me alone when I wanted to be alone.
And now, as a grown-up, I'm thankful for being able to take care of you, my dear mom, for taking you to your therapies, for understanding that sometimes you simply want to be alone.
Roles change without us noticing. That's why AARP gives you the information to provide even better care for your loved one. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
In brief, he was asking about this balance between what we would call our spiritual lives, or dharma, as he referred to it, and the material world, and how he feels like tragically in this country people are turning more and more to the Western culture of materialism and turning away from the traditional values of a spiritual life, and really how to A, counteract that, but also B, accepting that that is the society that we're in today. How do we balance for ourselves, for our children, both of those? If you look at Dharma in general and our Dharma in specific, what you'll see is that there's nowhere that it says, thou shalt not prosper materially. Dwarka, where Krishna was king, was a city made of gold. Lanka, where Ravan was king, was also a city made of gold. The problem was clearly not the gold. The problem had to do with where Ravan had gone astray in terms of his ego, his lust, his greed, his arrogance, his illusion. It wasn't the gold itself that took him off the path of Dharma, because here Dwarka was a city made of gold. We have so many stories in the scriptures of there being a beautiful, not just balance, but a coexistence of prosperity on a material level and full and complete Dharma. And then, of course, we also have stories of, whether it's Shabari, whether it's Vidurji, of that incredible wealth of spirituality in the face of absolute absence of anything materially. And what all of this taken together makes us realize is that the wealth itself isn't either the barrier to the spirituality, nor is it a catalyst for it. Sometimes they coexist, sometimes they don't coexist. Really, where the balance comes and where the focus comes and the importance comes is what our attention is on. If our attention is on simply the accumulation of more and more material wealth, I need to be richer than, better off than, higher than my neighbor, my brother, my cousin, my foe, my peer, then that's where my entire focus goes. And we cannot simultaneously walk in two directions. You cannot walk east and walk west, or walk north and walk south. We have to choose a focus in our life. And when our focus is simply on the accumulation of material wealth, that's the path that we walk on, and everything else takes a backseat. Whether it's our physical health, whether it's our family, whether it's Dharma. However, when we make spirituality and Dharma the focus, there's nothing in it that says, thou shalt be poor. Thou shalt not own nice things. Thou shalt ride a bicycle instead of drive a car. There's nothing like that in any of the scriptures. All we're told is, thou shalt not lose sight of what's important in life under the allure of all that glitters. So when we walk our path of Dharma, very frequently what we find is that success follows. There's actually a beautiful story about this that I love, which is of a woman, and she's home alone one day, and there's a knock on the door. And she goes to answer the door, and standing at the doorstep are these three men. And they say to her, is your husband home? So she says, no, but that's okay, come on inside. And they say, no, that's okay, we'll wait outside until your husband comes home. It's the proper thing to do. My name is Love, and with me are success and wealth. And when your husband comes home, please ask him which of us he would like to invite into the house, because only one of us can enter the home. So the men wait on the front lawn, and finally the family comes home, and she tells them about what's happened. So the husband says, I think we should invite success into the house, because if we have success, then our dear son will get into the university that he wants to get into, and then he'll get the job that he wants, and then everything will be wonderful. So she says, well, sure, but honey, don't you think that if we invite wealth into the home, then we'll already be wealthy, and it won't matter what university he gets into. It won't matter what job he gets, because we'll already have wealth. Their daughter says, Mom, Dad, thank you so much for thinking so much about myself and my brother, but really, I think we should invite love into the home, because wherever there's love, we will all be together. Where there's love, we don't need anything else. Even if he doesn't get into the university, even if he doesn't get the job, at least we'll have love. And that's really what we want. So her parents, of course, are touched, slightly embarrassed, naturally. And they say, oh, you've made such a beautiful decision. So the mother goes out onto the lawn and she says, okay, which of you is love? Love stands. She says, you may enter our house. We have decided to invite you into the house. So love stands and starts to enter, and behind him, the other two follow. So after love crosses into the house, the woman goes to close the door. But these other two men start to walk in, and she says, no. We've invited love in, and as you mentioned, only one of you can come in, so I'm so sorry, success and wealth, you'll have to wait outside. And love says, ma'am, if you had invited success or wealth into your house, he would have had to enter alone. But wherever love goes, success and wealth always follow. And that is this way of bringing the balance. Because sometimes, of course, it's material success and material wealth. Sometimes it's inner wealth and inner success. Sometimes it's wealth of love of our loved ones and our family. It takes so many forms. But wherever love goes, everything follows. And so, if we make love, which really is just another name for Dharma, because all of what Dharma tells us, Vasudev Kutumbakam, the world is a family. Well, if the world is a family, it means love them. Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam, Yat Kincha Jagatem Jagat. Everything in the universe is pervaded by the divine. Well, if that's true, love them. See the divine in all. It means love. So all of what Dharma teaches us, from our puja to our daily life, is all about love. Love for the Creator, and therefore, as we were speaking about on the banks of Ganga, love for the creation. And if we dedicate our lives to that, everything else follows. Puja Swamiji always speaks about filling our shelf and filling ourself, and how many times we are focused on just filling our shelves, the accumulation of material wealth. And then we accumulate it, but we find that we are empty inside. We don't have that anchoring, that grounding. This is where you get all of these stories of fabulously wealthy, successful people who are alcoholics, drug addicts, who commit suicide, who suffer depression. Whereas if we focus on filling the self, then everything becomes full. And so in terms of just lastly, child rearing, raise the child with love. Love for God in every name, every form. Love for themselves because God lives within them. Love for everyone and everything around them. And that's the greatest gift you can give them. Everything else will come. Lastly, just to share one other of my favorite of Puja Swamiji's lines and teachings, particularly abroad, where, as you mentioned, this focus is so much more materially. He always says to the families abroad, he says, don't worry about giving your children cars. Cars they will buy. Worry about giving them sanskars. And if you focus your child rearing on giving sanskaras, the cars and all of the rest will come in its own time. Very, very quickly in response to the question, he said that in the villages, he feels like children are not getting enough spirituality because they're not able to go, whether it's to schools, whether it's to other educational facilities, and the tragedy of that. Two just very, very quick points about that. First of all, tragically, schools are what suck spirituality out of our children. Now, they give them a lot of other good things. I'm not saying we shouldn't send our children to school, but we should not have the impression that our schools are what are giving our children spirituality. That comes from home. Tragically, what our schools are teaching them is memorize this, memorize that. This is your number. This is your rank. You are as worthy as your percentage. You are your percentage, in fact. How many schools is it not about my name, but my registration number? So we're not actually giving spiritual education in the schools, which is a completely different question that we don't have time for right now. But nonetheless, it's a very important one because that's really what's needed. Until we have it in the schools, this is what happens at home. And I think actually from what I've seen, in the villages, there's so much more spirituality because there isn't the indoctrination of the system that says you are your bank account, you are your achievement, you are your number, you are what type of car you drive. So in many cases, although they're suffering on so many other levels, I think that spiritual touch actually still, thankfully, is probably what keeps them alive. But quickly on the other point, we are doing a lot of work, so many other organizations are doing a lot of work to bring education, reading, writing, arithmetic, but reading, writing, arithmetic with sanskaras into the villages so that they actually get the education they need to be able to further their lives. But along with that education, they don't have the spirituality sucked out of them. Rather, it actually gets nourished and nurtured to grow and blossom. But more is required for sure.
भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यम् भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यम् भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यम् भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्।
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
On June 21st, wherever you are in the world, we invite you to join us for the Yoga Day Summit, a free 12-hour online event featuring exclusive interviews, yoga classes, and sacred music. Meet Indian sages and saints, scientists, and modern yoga masters as they explore the life-changing path of yoga. Go to yogadaysummit.com for your free pass today. Presented by Uplift and the Shift Network in association with OMTimes.